Hello, this is Joshua for Frost Dragon Designs, and today I'd like to talk to you about my electrical engineer cat, Hard Enamel pin. This pin is part of my larger Cats Doing Science collection. Now let's get into the design. Now, before I say anything else, I would like to say I'm dedicating this pin design to my dad, who has been a tinkerer his entire life. He never got any sort of college degree in electrical engineering, but I'm betting that he knows a fair bit more than a lot of people with those degrees. He inspired my love of science and my desire to understand how things work. My mom always jokingly said, "Don't ask your father what time it is, he'll tell you how to build a clock." So this one's for you, Dad. You can see from this video that the table was the first part of this design that I was working on, since I was recycling the cat in the book from other science cat designs. I was attempting to set up a simple 2-point perspective for the table lines so that when you looked at it, something didn't feel off. Our brains are remarkably good at picking up on things that don't quite add up to our experiences. So when you look at an illustration, if something feels off or strange about it, it's often because the perspective is done incorrectly and does not match up against your lifetime of experience looking at three-dimensional objects. I was trying to base that 2-point perspective off of the lines that are already present from the book. The problem I was running into, though, was that when I originally illustrated the book, I did not do that in proper 2-point perspective. I eyeballed it, and some of those lines are parallel, and it just kind of went with what looked good enough at the time. In illustration, you can often get away with that when there is a very limited number of parallel lines. The problem now becomes, as I'm adding more and more and more parallel lines to introduce a table and things sitting on the table, it's giving more information for your mind to look at and say, something's not quite right here. But being the lazy artist that I am, I certainly did not want to properly illustrate the book in 2-point perspective and then go back and edit all the other Cats Doing Science pins. If nothing else, changing them might trick your brain into thinking that they didn't look right, since it has now gotten used to that specific book. So what do we do in situations like this? Well, the best thing that I have found to do is to basically pull a Jack Sparrow and use those 2-point perspective lines as guidelines. Follow them until they don't work for you. There are no art police who are going to come and arrest you if your 2-point perspective is not completely followed on every aspect of your illustration. And at the end of the day, making sure that the design visually looks good trumps whether it is accurate, in my personal opinion. Another challenging aspect of this design for me was the cutout spaces that were being created as I worked on it. The tail and the table and the book were making a lot of little cutout areas, and I needed to find a way to make those not as small. I either needed the cutouts to be larger or unified, or something like that. The bigger those cutout spaces are, the easier it is for my production partner to manufacture the pins. They have in the past told me what their threshold is, how big they can make them, what the smallest space for a cutout they can do and actually be able to manufacture it is. But I push those boundaries sometimes, and sometimes they're able to do it and sometimes they're not. But I try to go by what they've told me because they've made many more pins than I have, and they have a much better understanding of what they are able to cleanly produce. Spent so much time talking about this table, so what is going on top of this table? Well, what I have going on top of the table is basically going to be a soldering station. Solder is a metal alloy that is melted and used to make a good electrical connection between either components or on a circuit board or perhaps wiring. And you do this with a tool called a soldering iron. You basically have soldering wire made out of this material, and you feed it into the area that you want to solder together, and you use the iron to melt it at a very hot temperature. It cools pretty quickly on both pieces that you are soldering together, and that's what makes the electrical connection so that the electricity will flow from one component to another component in whatever it is that you're building. I like to imagine that this particular electrical engineer kitty is building a prototype of some sort of device or something that he has, drawn up the designs for, and now he's building one of his first prototypes. Now, my dad didn't do a whole lot of building of new devices or inventions, but he did a lot of repair of electronics growing up. This whole scene is something very common that I would have seen in my basement growing up. I would have seen my dad over at his soldering station. There would have been, boxes of old electronics underneath of it. Sometimes he would scrap scrap parts from those for fixing other things. So that's why this pin design is really, dedicated to him, because he was the inspiration for so many of the details on this particular pin design. Now, I didn't get his particular acumen with understanding electronics or electronic components. That just wasn't really my bend. It wasn't my passion like it was for him. But I did pick up a few things here and there, and I certainly picked up a healthy respect for people having different abilities, for having different things that they're interested in and that they can understand and comprehend. And thinking back on those memories from growing up really was what I did to develop this pin design. I would look at it and just think, okay, well, what else can I add to make it match my experience more? Now, not all electrical engineers do prototyping. Some of them just do the paper type work. They do the designs, the blueprints, the drawings. But I would imagine that a fair number of those individuals are tinkerers themselves and really enjoy this aspect of it. I have a very good friend who one of his hobbies is he likes to work on audio electronics, like stereos and amplifiers and those sorts of things. And when I sent him an image file of this particular design, his response back, I think, was in all caps with exclamation points. And it was like, dude, that's me. So what I love about that was the people who are into tinkering with electronics, I feel like this design will really speak to them. They'll understand it. They know what it is. And I like that. I like creating designs for specific audiences. It's great if people who aren't into electrical engineering understand it or just think it's cool looking or whatnot. That's cool. I'm very happy for that. But the people who, do soldering on the weekend and see this, I want them to be like, hey, that one's definitely for me. I think that's why the science cats in general are resonating so strongly with so many people. And I'm just so happy to be bringing a little bit of joy and artistry and kiddiness into those spheres. So I hope you enjoyed watching me design this pin. I hope that you like this pin itself. If you did, please go ahead, like and subscribe. I put out a new pin design video every week, sometimes two, and I would love to have you along for the next one. So thank you so much for your time and have a great rest of your day.